if, well, with your permission, I'd like to just mention something, inshallah.
Yes.
Last week, after reflecting on the class,
Can I
realized.
Can I first ask that Imam makes dua? Then
Of
we'll
course.
allow you to make the comment. Otherwise, your comment is not going to get the barakah of the dua. Tafaddal, Imam Hussein.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil mursaleen Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Rabbana zidna ilma warzuqna fahma. Allahumma arhamna arham والدينا ارحم أولادنا ارحم أقربائنا وارحم أصدقائنا وارحم أساتذتنا واشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا وارحم أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل عواقب أمورنا بالخير بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين بسر الفاتحة.
Shukran, Imam Hussein. Yunus, you wanted to make a comment about last week. Tafaddal.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So after reflecting on last week's class, I then realized I said something majorly erroneous. It was a major error of my side, where I made the comment to say that nobody knows what the future holds, only Allah does. And to make such a blanket statement, I seek Allah's forgiveness, and I seek the forgiveness of those who do know, and I seek the forgiveness from everyone who listened to that that discourse. And the reason why I'm saying that is I then realized that Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given knowledge of the future. There are the awliya Allah who is given knowledge of the future, which is unseen. So for me to have made that statement, I seek Allah's forgiveness and may have mercy on me. And I think I meant it from a point of the general population of insan, on the level of Islam. So inshallah, I seek your forgiveness.
Yunus, can I just respond very quickly without going into a lot of detail around it? You were actually not wrong. You were right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who knows the future in full. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us glimpses depending on our status of who we are and how close we are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah gives us insight sometimes into the future, but only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly knows everything about the future. And in any case, whatever we do know, that knowledge belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to no one else. Allah gives us the opportunity to, and gives us access to glimpses of the future, but it's never something that where we can compare what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is and anyone else or anything else in the entire dunya. So your statement, we take what you've said and we take it in the right kind of spirit. And I clearly don't want people to feel that they need to apologize if they got something wrong. We are all learning, and inshallah at the end of this day, or at the end of the session, hopefully, we will all have made progress to some extent. But if we make mistakes along the line, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands. Shukran. We leave it on that note. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa ashabi wa barik wa sallim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imam Hussein's request was that we should briefly touch on the previous session, just to recap very briefly on what we said so that it lays the base for what we are going to be dealing with next. This topic is so vast that we'll have to pull the threads together down the line. But what we are busy with are the three linked sifat, and those sifat are knowledge, power, and will. And we said nothing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is linked or dependent on anything. Everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-subsistent, it's self-sufficient, it's independent, it's perfect. There's no link or dependence. The fact that the scholars have referred to it as linked sifat, we must understand as a means of making it easier for us to understand. And the first one we dealt with was knowledge. And just so that we all on the same page, we refer to the hadith of where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that 50,000 years before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created creation, Allah instructed the pen to record everything in the Lawhil Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. And whatever is there is totally unchangeable. Nothing, no one can ever change it. Now, if we take the concept of knowledge as the first sifat, that should clarify how we understand the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being all-knowing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not decree our choices at the time when the pen was instructed to record what is going to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recorded what was going to happen. Write down the history of whatever is going to happen in the dunya, and Allah has foreknowledge of that. So that foreknowledge meant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not have to wait for it to happen to know exactly what is going to happen. I want to leave it like that for now, because time never applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, Allah knew what was going to happen. And that is the way we should understand that hadith. Pre-knowledge is different from instructing us to abide by certain things that Allah has already predetermined. Now, I'm not going to spend more time on that. I think if there are questions around this, we will allow the questions as they unfold during the session that we are going to be dealing with now. Now, what I have decided to do the next sifat is the sifat of power. We said there are three sifat that's linked. Knowledge, power, and will. We're going to deal with the second one. Now, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful, it's a statement that even children make. We all say that, we all know that. But do we understand what is power? No one can ever know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power really means in true reality. No one. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything about himself. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfection and everything else is creation. Remember this, it's such a simple statement that I'm making, but you can use it as a tool to assist you to understand things down the line. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his sifat, his names, his actions are absolutely perfect. And nothing else can compare to that perfection. So if we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala represents utter perfection, then so does all his sifat. Now, when we talk about power, I thought it would be useful for me to quickly touch on how we know power in our material world. What do we know about power? We know about Eskom, we know about the sun. But if you ask anything about Eskom, then all they can say is they switch off the power when they have problems. We talk about the sun, we say it comes up that time, it sets that time. But I thought it would be useful. So it's going to sound a little bit technical and maybe scientific. And let me just make the final point before I start. And that is, based on what we said about knowledge, we must now have the understanding in our own mind that no knowledge is new to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all scientific knowledge, no matter what we are talking about, whether it is good or bad or speculation or proven fact, doesn't matter. That knowledge of what we are busy with or will be discovering is all known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because nothing new can be added to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. So when we talk about science, we're actually talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. What is known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in full. So let me start with the first point. Let me just stop the share. You see, when you have the hassle of being old like me, then you have the problem of being challenged with technology. Oh, ya Allah, make it easy for me. Okay, I'm going to leave it on. I was going to do it and let it come up one at a time. I'm going to try and go fast through this part and not spend too much time. But if there's anything anyone wish to ask about any of these things, then please do. Because I want to say that one of the most powerful things for me was to strengthen my own personal understanding of the wonders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Going into science has been a tremendous, tremendous journey for me, subhanallah. And those of you who have gone through the book that I wrote on how Allah created the universe and the amazing human body, I would advise you to go through that, because some of these things are covered in there. But when we talk about power in the universe, the sun we know, but a general point to make is that heat, light, and radiation are some of the major forms of energy in this entire universe. Now, one of the things that we are not very familiar with is that without the sun, we say, there will be no life on the planet Earth. But we don't make the connection other than the presence of the sun and maybe the light. But what actually happens is that the energy that the sun transmits and we receive, that energy from the sun is converted by the plants with the sunlight and carbon dioxide and water. It changes the sunlight into chemical energy. And that chemical energy is used to produce glucose, and glucose is the substance from which we draw the energy for human beings and for animals for that matter. Now you might say, yeah, but some people, they don't really eat vegetables and plants and things like that. They concentrate mainly on meat. But what happens is that even the meat comes from the animals eating the plants. And the plants, the energy they get from the plants is in fact the energy they get from the sun. Now, if you look at that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is truly great. The sun is an object there, but Allah has worked out the means of how we will be able to extract the energy from the sun. And for the plants, not only do the plants supply us the energy, but the plants actually take the carbon dioxide that's in the air and it converts it to oxygen. Human beings take the oxygen and they exhale carbon dioxide. The plants then take the carbon dioxide and turns it back into oxygen. Now, one of the things we must learn out of this is the law of thermodynamics says that energy that's created, the energy in the universe, no new energy can be added to that. Listen to this point. No new energy can be added to the universe, and energy in whatever form cannot be destroyed. The amount of energy that is in the universe remains the same from the beginning of the universe till the end of the universe. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. What is the point here? When Allah created the universe with that energy, that was enough from the beginning of time till the end of time. Allahu Akbar. Now, when we think of that, you say, yeah, but there's things like gas and petrol, which are forms of energy. The petrol, the oil, the gas, and the coal are in fact plants that existed many millions, even billions of years ago. And it went underground, and over that period, it formed into fossil fuel. So that energy that was captured by the plants, it's almost like it's being stored in the earth. And now we take out the gas and the oil and we use it as a form of energy to power our cars and our power stations and all of that. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Now, the point here to make is just a simple point, and don't ponder if you can't remember these things too long on it, is that this has been confirmed. It's been confirmed that the, sorry for that, Einstein, you know, all of you know about Einstein, or you've heard about him, that he developed this formula of relativity, E is equal to mc squared. It's the law of conservation. Energy cannot be created, it cannot be destroyed. The same energy that's in the universe is conserved. It's the law of conservation, is kept constant from the beginning of time till the end of time. Now, the beginning of time, when Allah created the universe, Allah created it with the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The entire universe was created from the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A spark of that nur, scientists refer to this as the singularity. We said that if the universe is expanding, every day it's expanding. If you take the reverse of that and you reverse it more and more over time, it comes back to a speck. And Allah actually speaks about in the Holy Quran. Allah says, don't you know everything was united? And then we split it asunder. Allah speaks about that in the Quran. Now that point from which everything started, scientists actually managed to get to that point. And they said it was, you can see it here. Let me just show it to you so that you can see it. I don't know if you can see where my arrow is pointing. 10 to the power 40. That is 10 followed by 40 zeros degrees Celsius. This is what scientists have confirmed. That was the temperature of that. And from that single point, the entire universe with everything it contains was formed from that initial spark of energy. Now, from that point onwards, nothing was added and nothing was subtracted to that energy that was contained in it. Now, where does it all come from? And I'm just quickly going to go through that so that we don't get stuck too much on these issues. If we take that energy, the closest we can get to that energy and that we have some idea about is our sun. Amazingly, the sun is not made up of solid matter. It's not a ball like the earth with volcanoes and stuff. It's actually just made up of gas, mainly hydrogen and helium gas. And we are told it was formed about 5 billion years ago. And scientists have almost accurately established that our world, our universe as we know it, started 13.8 billion years ago. And the sun only formed 5 billion years later. And as a matter of interest, the earth, the age of the earth is established to be 4.5 billion years old. Now, how does it create all this energy? Allah uses a means. The sun is a means of getting power to us. But Allah uses a means even within that. And if you go in that and in that, you will come to the means that Allah uses to give that energy until you come to the point where there's no other means. It goes to the cause. And the one who determines it and creates it, and that is Allah. But if you go through, you will find all these things that you can go back and back and back and back. It creates it through nuclear fusion, the energy. Now, what is quickly nuclear fusion? I didn't mean to go through all of this. But let me just say, the amount of energy The amount of energy that the sun generates is mind-boggling. It sounds like it can't really be. 600 million tons of hydrogen gas it uses every single second. Every single second, it uses 600 million tons of hydrogen gas. Per second. And as a throwaway point, I just added in how many seconds are there in a year? 31.5 million seconds in a year. So you can do your own numbers of how much power there must be in the sun. When we say the sun is a source of power, and the sun is only one of trillions of stars in the universe. How much power is there in the universe? And it was one single spark that Allah used to create the sun, the universe, the entire universe, with all the suns and the galaxies and planets and whatever you have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this, and the sun consumed so much. And it's how much did it use over the 5 billion years? And they say it's got another, scientists expect it to last another 5 billion years. So the nuclear fusion, what is nuclear fusion? Just so that we have some idea, where does this power come from? So there's so much power from the sun, but where does it come from? How did Allah design this? Now that's not a solar system that you are seeing there. This is a pic of what an atom looks like. Now let me just say that atoms are the building blocks of every single thing in the entire universe. In fact, we can have 2 or 3 lectures or sessions just on the atom. If time ever allows, we'll go to the atom and speak more about the atom. Ibn Arabi says, 900 years ago, he said, if the secret of the atom becomes known, this he said 900 years ago, if the secret of the atom becomes known, then the secrets of the entire universe will be revealed. Subhanallah. 900 years ago. No wonder he's called Shaykhul Akbar. But, okay, so that's what it looks like. The yellow rings that's going around like that. Oh, let me just give you the other one, and then we'll move on to the more, some of the aspects of Tawhid. Just so that you have an idea when you talk about the atom. An atom, every single thing in the entire universe is made up of atoms. They are the building blocks of human beings, of everything you see around you. They're made up of atoms. Every single thing that you can see around you, whether it's in the sky, it's the sun, the moon, the planets, but the rock, the chair, the food, the people, the stars, everything, every single thing. Allah used one component, atoms, and constructed the entire universe from that. And within these atoms, Allah put in a certain amount of power which scientists can't fully understand. Let me not go into the technical detail about that, except to say, nuclear fusion, where the power comes from the sun, comes from the center, the red and purple center are bound together in what is referred to as the nucleus. And in the nucleus, you have protons and neutrons. The power, the nuclear power is used, the sun uses it to take other atoms and it fuses the nuclei together.
Nuclei.
Yeah, together, and in the process, it unleashes power that we use for, that the sun uses. In power stations, we use the opposite, but no rocket technical, I'm going to leave it like that. But just to give you an idea of where the power actually comes from, and these atoms that we are talking about were formed when? 13.8 billion years ago. So Imam Hussein is actually 13.8 billion years old. If we talk about this composition, that we are constructed, the physical construction of the human being is made up. Now you can go into, yeah, you were born then and all this, and you were only, we won't go there now. So we have an idea of what power in the universe is like. I probably didn't do justice to give you a true idea of how tremendous this power really is that we are talking about. But let me go on to the next, to the attribute, the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attribute of power. I think, having just gone through this very quickly now, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power is limitless, it can not be measured because there's no beginning or end or boundary to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power. And the important thing to recognize is that the source of all power in the entire universe is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine power. There is no other power in the universe. Let me make that clear. There is no other power in the universe. When we ascribe power to anything, we must know that that power is secondary power. There is no other power. There's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power. And that power, if we take the attribute of knowledge, Allah knows in Allah's divine, all-knowing ability, sifat, of all the possible things that exist in the world of possibilities. The divine power brings that from a state of possibility, or from, it's a possibility, brings it into actual existence in the universe. So there's nothing that Allah does not know, and there's nothing that Allah does not control through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine power. And it is the divine power that brings about the actions, the effect, because that's the knowledge. The knowledge stands on its own for our purposes, stands on its own, and the power makes it happen. It creates the effect. Knowledge is possibility. Power brings that possibility into a reality, into existence. Now I want to make the last point, and then we're gonna just pause quickly. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine power is sometimes referred to as the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, we make this mistake because we are part of this material world. So when we talk about light, Divine light, we say it's different, but it's a form of light. And that light brought the world into existence. We say the Noor, and when you explain Noor, what do we say? It's light, the light of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Noor. We must not make the mistake to say that the Noor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the same as the Noor or the power which brought the world into existence. Because if we do say that it's the same, it means that it comes from there, but you can't say it is part of that. Because if you say it is a part of that, then you say that part is in the world and the rest is with Allah. Dangerous, say. Nothing about Allah. We said when we dealt with the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is not composed of parts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not composed of parts. So we can never say that the Noor, the divine Noor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this power or this light or this Noor is part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Noor. The word part of never applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word it forms part of never applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Light in the material world or Noor of the material world will forever remain created. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine Noor, power, light, whatever we want to refer to it, is uncreated and it is perfect and it doesn't change whether creation is there or whether creation is not there. So I want to just pause on there. If you want to go back to the first part of how Allah created the universe and atoms and the sun or anything like that, please feel free. But I'm going to pause here and to hear whether there are any comments or questions that people would like to pose at the stage. The floor is open. Muhammad Fasir? Okay, Yunus?
No, Fasir, may I go ahead? Bismillah.
First of all, Assalamu alaikum. My question, Brother Salie, is obviously we've explained the science quite intensely, and I think a lot of the time we can get lost in the technicality of everything, the technical aspects of everything when we talk about science, because many of us don't necessarily grasp those concepts as well. But can we then say that with all the facts and figures that we've mentioned now and the vastness of the universe and all of that, is my understanding to demonstrate to us that that is not even a portion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power. It's not even a demonstration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power, but rather it is an example for us to understand the vastness of Allah's power in the sense that even this whole universe could be basically a drop in a massive, massive ocean. And even if Allah had to create 10 of these universes linked together, that it wouldn't be difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is the one who is omnipotent. Allah never loses power. Nothing gets taken from Allah. Allah does not need to rest on the seventh day, like we are taught in other faiths.
Yes. Shukran for that comment. I wish to add nothing to that. Yunus?
Now, I was thinking about our own human body and how, when we think about the universe, our mind literally blows up because you can't fathom the enormity of the universe as a creation. But when we bring it into as close as our own bodies, then the appreciation for this knowledge becomes greater also, subhanAllah. Our energies that we contain, our bodies are made up of atoms. It's a bit easier maybe to understand the concept of atoms and, you know, the whole concept of the nucleus from a physiological human body aspect. Because a lot of the time the knowledges of the universe becomes, you know, far-fetched or unrelatable, because we don't know what it looks like. But if we look to our own bodies, then we can see and feel, oh, this is what it refers to. And again, seeing the creator in action.
Yeah, I think I need to make you aware that your bodies might be closer to, but if we go into what goes on inside the human body, it is fascinating or inspiring that what goes on in the universe. We just don't know it. We know because we can touch our bodies, we can see our bodies, we can see other bodies, but we don't know what subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually created with inside all of us. You'll be shocked. That requires, in fact, the whole thing Allah created, book 6. If ever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us, we'll go into book 6, where it concentrates only on how Allah created the universe and what goes on inside the body based on what Allah says in the Quran. Ponder and reflect on the heavens and the earth, and within yourself. Book 6 only has to do with that. Go to the website, my website, download book 6 and read through it, and you'll be shocked to find the amazing things that's actually going on in the body. But we won't go into all of that now, but your point is well taken. Any other comment or question that people would like to raise now?
When Sheikh Manie was speaking about this, I immediately related it to the Salatul Mashishiyah, where when we start saying, when Falakatil Anwar, I think Sheikh Manie, when Shakatil Asrar, where the Noor is emerged, or it was a secret initially, and suddenly this Noor emerged. And this is, I can relate it to what Sheikh Manie was saying now, how the universe was created with all this light.
Subhanallah. 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 You see, the Quran and the Sunnah is there to guide us how to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we will all find different ways of how we make connections between the things that we are talking to. And hopefully, inshallah, as we go through, your understanding will be much greater than my understanding or anyone else's understanding, because that is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interacts with you at the individual. And may Allah open up even more understanding for you, Shabnam. Any other comments before we move on?
That's somebody in the Zambian government.
Okay, let's move on then. So the attribute of power is something that we must not make the mistake to say that power is, like we sometimes say, it's not even a drop in the ocean. This ocean that we are talking about is not composed of drops. The knowledge of the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that is totally aside from anything that we can conceive or we can relate to as far as creation is concerned. Creation can never be compared, is never similar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sifat, power or names. Now, you remember we were speaking about cause and effect earlier on. Now, when we talk about the attribute of power, it speaks about the ability to do something, the energy, that power to create effect. As a reminder for all of us, who spoke about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts power in us and then leaves us to do what we want as long as we account for what we have to do? Who
Qadariya.
like the
Qadariya.
The Qadariya.
Qadariya.
Okay. Do we all recall that that's how they believed, right? Do you know why they actually came with this belief? They first, these people, they looked at the Jabariya, the way the Jabariya said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if Allah wills something, then that is the way it must be. If Allah does not will, it cannot be. Therefore, everything that happens around us is the will of Allah. Is that true or not true?
True, but there's links that are missing.
No, never mind the links. Is it true or is it not true? Somebody else.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, but Salie, if I can take a crack at it, I would say that yes, in theory, it is true, but in the practical sense of it, we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the ability of free will and choice. Allah controls the outcomes. We can never create effect, but we do have access over our free will and choice.
No,
but everything else.
Yes, you're right. You see, you're already making the point because you know the answer. You know the answer. But the point that they are making, without reservations, what we must remember is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will determines what happens. If Allah does not will for it to be, it cannot be. If Allah wills for it to be, then it is. So everything you see is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That point, there's no conditions attached to that. Don't think of the answer when we talk about free will and choice. That part of their belief was rock solid. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that point. In fact, it's such a fundamental point that we should not throw it out, as they say, the baby with the bathwater. Everything you see around you is the will of Allah. Nothing can exist or be if it is not the will of Allah. Why? Because if it could exist outside the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it means that there are two wills, Allah's will and wherever that other will comes from. So that point of what the Jabariya said is 100% true. The second part of their belief of how they applied it to say that it doesn't matter what they do, if it's the will of Allah, that they mustn't do it, then Allah will stop them. And if it is the will of Allah, whatever, then it will happen like that. That's where they go wrong. But that first part, we must not make the mistake to forget how true and correct it is. So what the Qadariya did, they said But Allah gave us choice. And it's not right that human beings are created. We are given choice. And we are given power to do what we want. But where they go wrong, where do they go wrong? Aisha, where do they go wrong? Aisha, I think your mic is... Oh.
But Salie, I'm not having a good day today. Otherwise, someone else.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Shabnam? Where do the Qadariya go wrong in their belief?
Like what Salie said, they believe that Allah gave them choice, but they at the end of the day, whatever choices they make, it is they themselves that had the ability to carry it out. It wasn't Allah that gave effect to their choices.
Yeah, that's correct. But the thing that we must remember of where the Qadariya goes wrong and where we can also go wrong is that they believe that once Allah gave them power, that they can create their own effect. That's the point. They believe effect doesn't come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Effect comes from them once Allah gives them power and the ability to choose. Now, why did it, why would they make that point? Was based really on this point. And that is where the Mu'tazila, which we didn't deal with, where they also went wrong. They said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can never be associated with bad or evil. So if human beings do evil, then that deed and the effect comes from them. And that's where they went wrong by saying that human beings create their own effect. So it's important for us to remember these things, because Jabariya and Qadariya, somehow or other, we take aspects of that incorrect belief and we include it in the way we believe and do things. And we must be very careful. So we must remind ourselves that the ability to do things, the ability to create effect comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Never ever does it transfer to any created being. I'm not going to go through, we've dealt with cause and effect before. So I'm not going to go into all of that and repeat what we've said. But the important thing to do here is to say that when Allah uses means, any means in creation, an instrument or a tool, Allah would use that in a traditional way. Water, normally, if it's thrown on the plant, then the plant uses that to grow. We drink it to make food and to quench our thirst. Under normal circumstances, at the level of Islam, that applies. There's nothing wrong with saying it like that. But at the level of Iman and Ihsan, we understand the water never has ability. It doesn't have that power to create effect. That effect only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is something that I'm repeating so that we can include it in whatever thinking we have down the line. But this point I want to make. So if we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to drink water. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you decide to drink. You want to drink the water because you want to quench your thirst. Does it mean that when you drink the water, you start drinking, after the first drop, is there a guarantee that the water will quench your thirst?
No.
Louder?
No,
Why not, Shabnam?
because every drop needs the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to quench your thirst.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allah. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. We must remember that. Subhanallah. It's such an important thing. Every single drop needs the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you taking the knife and you stab the person, the first moment it enters, it needs the permission to go all the way till it enters, and every single movement of that knife needs the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because where do people make the mistake? They say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said for the knife, okay, I want you to cut. Then it cuts. Now it's got the permission. Now the knife has the ability to cut until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, don't cut anymore. What they are doing, they are in fact saying that Allah has transferred the ability for the knife to cut to the knife. And then after that, Allah withdraws that ability. It sounds reasonable and almost logical, does it not? Is that the way it works? Is that the way it works? Is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives permission for the knife to cut? Remember also this to make it even more complicated for you. Allah is not bound by time. You are bound by time, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not connected or bound to time. So when Allah says to the knife, cut, now the knife cuts, the first cut, it just enters, but you want to go deep. The rest that follows, if we take that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound by time, how do you understand this? Is it that after Allah said cut, then it cuts, then Allah withdraws the permission to create that effect? How do you understand that? Are you still with us, Muhammad Fasih? Or anyone else? Shabnam?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never transfers the effect onto any of his creation.
Subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. Shabnam, mashallah. You have a very, very solid understanding of this concept. Never does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ability.
I wrote that down long ago as well.
Now, why didn't you say it? You writing
I
it
wrote
down.
here, abilities not transferred from Allah to an object.
Now that's the writing. Now you must put it in your heart. So whether it's Allah's knowledge or whether it's Allah's ability to create effect or anything about to Allah, never goes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to anything in creation. I had a discussion with somebody in the early stages when I was pondering on these issues. And he had the concept, but Allah's not bound by time. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the permission is already there, unless Allah says it's not there for it to cut. And I disagreed with him and I couldn't explain it and I didn't know where I went wrong. It is the question of transferring. That the moment it transfers from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means that there are two entities, Allah and something else that can do it. And that
Allah does not share power.
exactly.
The knife doesn't share power with Allah.
Yeah. Allah shares nothing with no one. And it doesn't compete or become a partner in that particular issue, ever. So I think I am so pleased that we've actually come to terms with this aspect of it. Let me just see. All right, so I'm about to conclude now. We're going to go to the attribute of will next in the next session, but I want to make this point. And let me just stop the share. We mustn't make the mistake though to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who can create effect. Can the bus knock you down if you stand in front of it? That's a question. If you stand in front of an oncoming bus or a car or a train, can it knock you down? Yunus?
Through the natural laws that has been set in this world, it's logical to say that the bus can knock you down. It's cause and effect. But the actual ability for that bus to give effect to knocking you lies solely with Allah.
Very well said. Very well explained too. It doesn't require for me to add anything to that. Under normal circumstances, Allah has shown us how Allah makes the world operate. The knife can cut, water quenches the thirst, and so on and so on and so on. But at the level of Iman, we know it's not the bus. So now you have this understanding. This bus doesn't have the ability to knock. That effect of knocking comes from Allah. Can you stand in front of the bus? Is it right for you to stand in front of the bus and say, effect doesn't come from you, effect comes from Allah, and you stand in front of the bus? Come!
Mahmoud Salie, can I maybe bring in the concept of Ratib in here?
Not now. We're right at the end and time has already caught up with us. I want to say, under the normal circumstances, Why can't we stand in front of the bus? Can the awliya stand in front of the bus? Sometimes they can and sometimes they can't. Any one of us ordinary people, we should never stand in front of buses. Stand behind the bus so that you can get into the bus. Why? Because we don't know. Shabnam, you want to say so?
We should abide by the natural laws.
Yes. And why? Why should we
Because it's
abide?
consequences. Because it's consequences.
At the natural level, yes, we know the consequences. I want to hear something else. Because no one, that's a clue. What am I going to say?
I think it's we should preserve our lives at all times,
Yes,
not risk our lives.
that's correct. But I wanted to hear that we say no one knows what the will of Allah is. No one knows what the will of Allah is. In fact, even if the awliya go in front of the bus, they never do it because they have ability. The awliya never believe that they can stand in front of the bus and make the bus stop. They don't believe. Their belief is purely that everything comes from Allah. And they appeal to that. And through their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they know it comes from Allah. We don't know what the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. But say I stand in front of the bus and I really make strong dua. Maybe not me, maybe somebody like Imam Hussein. But he stands in front of, and he says, stop. Because there's maybe a child in front of the bus. And the bus stops. It can happen. And the bus stops. Then you know it was then, after the bus stops, then you know it was the will of Allah for that child not to die like that. Afterwards, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes gives us the ability to find out what Allah's will is. But most of the time, you don't know. You find out maybe some of these occasions you find out that's later in life. So the general practice should be abide by the general laws and follow it. And don't you try and preempt what the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, because nobody will ever know what the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Not even the awliya. Because their belief is strong. They know it doesn't come from them to stop the bus. They would like to stop the bus to save that child. But it doesn't mean every time the awliya want to do something that they can just do it. It's whether Allah wills for them to do it or not. You see how much of the past we're covering every time, till these concepts become more clear and more clear and more clear, till it becomes part of how we believe, and there is very little uncertainty. All right, we've arrived at the point where we conclude, and we're going to go on to the attribute of will. Any final questions or comments before we conclude? Muhammad Fasih, did you want to say something?
Yeah, but Salie, just in wrapping up, in terms of the idea again of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is something that a lot of people struggle with, especially those people who've lost loved ones or have been in accidents or things that they, in a sense, blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or blame themselves for, saying, I could have, or I should have, or if I didn't marry this man, I wouldn't be poor, or if I didn't marry this man, I wouldn't, basically, them saying that if they had taken a different path by virtue of their choice, that they would have had a different life. Can we say then, through what we've explained now, that Allah subhanahu those statements are incorrect? Can we say that those statements are batil in Islam, in a sense, by virtue of what we said now?
Not really. It's difficult. It's one of those things that the answer is both yes and no, depending on the circumstances. But we are going to get to the question of will as the next step. The point about what we said about standing in front of the bus is about more the question of effect. Let us understand the question of will after we have dealt what is the will of Allah. It's so intertwined that we're going to, you can't avoid these questions when we are dealing with this part. But let us rather pause that question till the answer, till we've discussed the question of the will. Imam Hussein, is there any final comment or question you wish to pose at this stage? Is he still with us? Yeah, Imam Hussein?
Yeah, I need to unmute myself.
Yes, you are unmuted.
There we go now. No, I just wanted to say that the science has rattled my mind, so I couldn't answer any.
Yeah, no, but go through those things. I am appealing to everyone to go through the scientific things. You will find you are only dealing with the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And within that, Allah has directed us to it. There are many things that will open up doors for you as a person. Unexpected doors where it falls on your heart and you suddenly see, Ya Allah, I've overlooked this all my life. And you suddenly feel that it strengthened you in many ways. I would encourage everyone to make effort to go through those things. You will find lots of gems and openings there for you, inshallah. So Imam, is that the only comment you wish to make?
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, so if it's okay with everyone, we'll have the closing dua now, inshallah.
Yunus. Haji Yunus.
Tafadal, Yunus.
الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين ارحمنا يا ربنا لك الحمد يا ربنا لك الحمد والشكر كله ولك الحمد الشكر كله ولك الحمد الشكر كله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماتي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما وأزدنا بالصالحين. اللهم إنا نسألك خير ما سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من كل شر ما سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. ربنا تقبل منا بسر أسرار سورة الفاتحة. الحمد لله.
Alhamdulillah, 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 wa shukrulillah. Shukran to everyone for your presence here today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us to follow through on the other sessions so that we can try and complete all the aspects and actually leave at the end of this with a better understanding. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all those people who are sick, family and friends, especially Sheikh Siraj, Imam Riyan, and my cousin who went in today for a triple bypass, and my wife, and everyone else who is sick, and all those of us who may have problems, whether it is with the sustenance or whether it's with relationships. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supply the solutions and give us a way forward out of these difficulties. So inshallah, we'll see you Sunday, and I leave you in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bibi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam wa rahmatullah. Muhammad Fasih, I'll phone you on the phone because this will record the balance of the session.
No problem.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I was about to say to Brother Salie, I was going to give my banking account details now, and then it will also be recorded. So,
Okay, assalamu alaikum. What's his name, Imam Hussein?
Is Muhammad Taha.
Taha, mashallah,
Muhammad
mashallah,
Taha.
mashallah, mashallah.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum to the uncle.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.